Hello and welcome to week 1 in your level 3 certificate in personal training. You should by now have accessed the videos to help enable you to answer questions on the circulatory system. The next presentation that you will be observing now is regarding blood pressure, and you will need to observe this presentation to enable you to answer 3 learning outcomes. Learning outcome number 1. To explain the short and long-term effects of exercise on blood pressure, including the Valsalva effect. Learning outcome number 2 is to explain the cardiovascular benefits and risks of endurance and aerobic training. And outcome number 3, to define blood pressure classifications and their associated health risks. So before we go on to discuss the 3 main learning outcomes associated with blood pressure, it's important that we familiarise ourselves with some of the key facts. So what is blood pressure? Well, blood pressure can be high and it can also be low. Blood pressure changes can often occur as a result of exercise, stress, relaxation, and heart disease as well. Now, blood pressure is the amount of pressure that the blood exerts on the blood vessel walls. So it's the pressure exerted against blood vessel walls. Apologies about the writing, but I'm sure you get the impression. Okay, second question. Why are blood pressure measurements important? Well, this can give us key information about a person's current health, whether it be high blood pressure or low blood pressure. Both high and low can indicate different types of current health that client are in. So it helps to detect issues surrounding health. How do we measure blood pressure? Well, blood pressure can be measured manually via a sphygmomanometer, and you might have seen these in the doctors where they put the blood pressure cuff around your arm and they have a stethoscope and they pump up the cuff and they're listening for changes within the circulation. The other method is electronic, which is all done via a battery operated blood pressure cuff. So we have manual and electric. Fourth question, what is blood pressure measured in? Blood pressure is measured in millimeters of mercury, or often referred to as mmHg. mmHg, millimeters of mercury, and this is often found on the stethoscope sphygmomanometer. Question number 5. What is systolic? Well, this is a measurement of your blood pressure when the heart is contracting or beating. Measured when contracting. Just fit that in there. Question number 6. What is diastolic? Well, diastolic is the measurement of blood pressure when your heart is relaxed. So measured when relaxed. And it's important that we have these 2 values with blood pressure because it helps to indicate, again, issues surrounding health. Okay, so in this slide we have the short and long-term effects that exercise has on blood pressure, including this thing called the Valsalva effect. Now, the Valsalva effect, or the Valsalva maneuver, is basically an increase in intra-abdominal pressure caused by increased blood pressure. So, for example, if you imagine in the gym and you're lifting weights and you hold your breath, this creates an increased intra-abdominal pressure, which will have an effect of increasing your blood pressure. You might see this visually by someone holding their breath and going red in the face. That is the Valsalva effect. Now, exercise in the short term will also cause the blood vessels within your body to vasodilate. This means that blood vessels will get bigger. This allows more blood to travel through your cardiovascular system to your muscle tissue, supplying oxygen to improve energy output. Some exercises, namely isometric exercises, can cause vasoconstriction, funnily enough. And this can actually cause increased blood pressure. Obviously, if you're narrowing the diameter of your blood vessels, blood pressure will increase. Your cardiac output will increase. This is the amount of blood pumped out of your heart per minute. Obviously, if you're exercising, your heart is beating faster, therefore more blood will be exerted and pumped out of your heart per minute. So cardiac output will increase as workload goes up. Often as a result of short-term exercise, you will reach something known as steady state. This is when your oxygen demand matches the supply that it gets. Now, this will have an effect of increasing the systolic blood pressure. Remember, this is when the blood pressure is measured as the heart contracts. Obviously, if the heart is beating faster and more blood is being pumped out, systolic pressure will increase. During certain types of endurance exercises, diastolic blood pressure will remain constant. It may even decrease with elite athletes as blood feeds into the working muscles due to arterial dilation. And lastly, with certain types of resistance training, both systolic and diastolic pressure may increase. And as a side note, remember, cardiac output is heart rate, so the amount of times your heart beats per minute, times the amount of blood pumped out within each beat. So cardiac output is the amount of blood pumped out of your body per minute. Okay, so moving on over to the long-term effects of blood pressure. The long-term effects of exercise on blood pressure. Firstly, we will get capillarization. Now, this is where new capillaries over time, or small blood vessels as you might otherwise know them, increase in number. Now, if you increase the number of capillaries, i.e. if you increase the number of blood vessels within your system, that means that more blood can flow through your system. If more blood can flow through your system, more oxygen can be delivered to muscles, and there will be less blood pressure overall because you have more blood vessels to carry the blood. So, capillarization, decrease in blood pressure. Another long-term effect of exercise on blood pressure is your body will begin to be able to regulate fluid much better. Now, you don't just have blood in your system, you have plasma, you have obviously waste products and nutrients that are carried within your blood, and long-term exercise effects will help to control this level of blood volume. It will also help to reduce arteriosclerosis. You should now know what that is. That's a type of a heart disease. So it will prevent the buildup of plaque deposits from within the blood vessels, therefore making the diameter much wider, much more elastic, and therefore increasing the blood pressure. Long-term exercise on blood pressure will have an effect of increasing neural sensitivity. Obviously, the more you practice something and the more you do something, i.e. exercise, the better your neurological system will get, and thus this will have an effect of helping to reduce blood pressure because less stress is on the system. There will be a lower resting blood pressure due to healthier arteries and a more efficient heart. With long-term exercise, your heart is a muscle, the heart will strengthen, and therefore this puts less stress on the cardiovascular system. We've talked about increased left ventricle hypertrophy of the heart, and also stroke volume will increase. So this is the amount of blood pumped out per beat. Remember, these are all effects of long-term effects of exercise. Another effect is your heart rate. Not only will your heart rate decrease at rest with regular and consistent training, but therefore your submaximal heart rate will also reduce, and therefore your maximum heart rate will also reduce. So there'll be much less stress placed on your system. Now, because of the increased stroke volume, this will have a much better effect of lowering your blood pressure. And lastly, the long-term effect of exercise on blood pressure results based around red blood cells. Now, our hemoglobin content within our blood cells increases, which basically means there's less need to produce even more red blood cells. And if there's less red blood cells, this will lower the viscosity or the thickness of the blood, which will help it flow much more easily through your system, again thus reducing blood pressure. So there you have the short and long-term effects of exercise on blood pressure, including the Valsalva effect. You should now be in a position to be able to detail these within your workbook. Remember, if there are any areas about this that you do not understand or that are confusing, please go to the forum and write your question, and I or another member of the group will hopefully be able to answer your questions. Now, our next